Passenger in seat 21, I racked my brain trying to recall how I knew her. I sifted through all the women I knew, methodically reviewing each category: gym, family, friends, job. Despite my efforts, I couldn't shake the feeling of familiarity. It gnawed at me, irritating me to no end. Unsolved mysteries were my nemesis. They haunted me until I unearthed the truth, even waking me at 2 a.m. with sudden revelations. As she stowed her coat and carry-on in the overhead compartment, she glanced in my direction, her lips forming a slight smile, but her eyes betrayed no recognition. Maybe I was mistaken, but I doubted it. Settling into my seat, I cursed the faceless administrative employee who assigned me the center seat instead of a window or aisle. Meanwhile, the lady of mystery had no such trouble and comfortably occupied the window seat. I continued to observe her profile, attempting to extract any memory of our acquaintance. Peering through the gap between the seats, I watched as she rummaged through her purse, retrieving her phone and placing it on the vacant seat beside her. Leaning forward, her dark hair obscuring her face, she carefully stashed her purse under the seat ahead. As she straightened up, picking up her phone, I averted my gaze, respecting her privacy as she unlocked it. When I stole another glance, a smile crept onto my face. The answer to my puzzle lay in the background of her phone, a jovial picture featuring none other than Michael Davenport, our head of engineering. Thanks to Michael, I ascended to the position of installation manager. He saw through my facade of modesty and recognized my potential. Our bond deepened over shared experiences, from workplace betrayals to personal struggles. He was more than a mentor. He was a friend who uplifted me in my darkest moments. Seeing his image on her phone brought clarity. She was Karen Davenport, Michael's wife. Though we crossed paths at office gatherings in the past, her lack of acknowledgement earlier indicated she didn't recall me. I wasn't surprised. Karen always maintained a distance from production staff, preferring communication with management. Contemplating reintroducing myself, I hesitated. The awkwardness of initiating a conversation outweighed the urge to reconnect. Besides, with the flight not at full capacity, I dismissed the idea of requesting a seat change from the flight attendant. Opting for distraction, I opened my crossword book, only to freeze midway. A photo on her screen grabbed my attention, a stark contrast to Michael's wholesome image. This man, significantly younger and of a different race, posed provocatively, accompanied by explicit messages. My heart sank as I realized Karen's intentions. She was just another cheater. Sympathy flooded me for Michael, a devoted family man. His love for his wife and adopted children was undeniable. Regardless of Karen's grievances, her betrayal was inexcusable. If she was unhappy in her marriage, she had to take steps to solve the problems or leave. She had to finish one thing before starting another. The old pain, the old rage, the old disgust flared up again, taking me by surprise. Old instincts also resurfaced, and my hand continued to move towards my pocket. But instead of taking the pen, I curled my fingers around my mobile. For a split second, I hesitated, letting the thought that Michael knew and approved of his wife's behavior swirl through my mind. I shook my head at the thought. Impossible. Michael was too much of a man to do such a cowardly thing. As if to confirm my conviction, my eyes were drawn to her left hand. I grinned darkly. She had taken off her rings and even put a plaster on her finger to hide all traces that she was wearing any. Perhaps she thought it was a sign of respect for Michael and their marriage, that removing her rings somehow made her a better person, or less of a cheater. Not in my eyes. Michael was a good guy. He deserved better than a cheating wife. He didn't deserve a stupid wife, and she should be one or the other. Michael would never forgive her if he found out, not with his story, not after his first wife did. Fragments of drunken swearing flooded my brain. He'll kill this man and her worthless boyfriend before I let her take my house and move in with her lover. This society girl will get a nasty surprise if she thinks I'm going to lie under her and let her walk away with all our property that I earned for us. But she did it, thanks to the judge who suggested that all men were scoundrels and deserved punishment. She led him to bankruptcy, and all he had left was the crumbling cottage that his mother left him. In fact, It was after I saw Michael get ripped off in the courts that I hatched a plan to stop Sue from doing the same to me. I secretly took a screenshot of her and then a distant shot to catch her profile. I wasn't sure what I would do with the photos. On the one hand, I wanted to send them to Michael immediately. On the other hand, I didn't want to be the bearer of such devastating news. His first divorce almost destroyed him. It took him many years to even start dating women, let alone trust anyone again. I put the phone away. Another passenger was now sitting next to me, and I didn't want him to alert Karen or one of the flight attendants that I was filming Karen without her knowledge. The 2-hour flight was agony. Every time I saw Karen through the crack, I was filled with disgust and longed for the opportunity to write to Michael about her betrayal. Was this already a betrayal? Perhaps she was on her way to her first date. Perhaps I was witnessing only the latest act in a series of betrayals. I've been thinking about this, and what I can conclude from the data: I have a photograph of his private parts and a plaster on her finger, probably to hide the dent and shadow of her wedding ring. My principles interrupted my thoughts. It just didn't matter. I even started composing an email. But every time I thought about sending it, I saw Michael's face in the months after the end of his first marriage. I saw his proud smile as he showed me the latest photographs of his adopted son and daughter, or their children. I heard his voice as he talked about how his eldest grandson called him grandfather for the first time during his last visit. God, how he loved his adopted children. It would kill him to lose them and their children. Did I have the right to do this to him after everything he had done for me? Did I have the right not to inform him of something so important to his happiness as this? And would he lose them at all? I have always been a determined person. I have proven this beyond a shadow of a doubt in a million work and personal decisions. Why was it so difficult for me to make this decision? Just to prove my loyalty to a man to whom I owe much, I had to destroy a large part of his soul. Could I do it? Could I not do this? What would I want Michael to do if our roles were reversed? Easily, I would like the problem to go away and never come back. Thus, the solution to my dilemma was born. However, a piece of the puzzle was missing. Did Mrs. Davenport care about Michael, or was she cheating before the divorce? If it was the latter, were her preparations for the ambush on Michael complete? If I warn him now, will he be less likely to be robbed when it happens? Hell, he was only a few years away from retirement. Uncertain, I developed a plan that I thought covered all the aspects that needed to be considered. This would minimize my interference, thus easing my conscience while at the same time protecting my friend and mentor from a cheating wife or an ambush. It would leave the end result in the hands of the gods, and that appealed to my aging, benevolent beliefs. It'll give the woman a chance to show her true colors and her intentions. I will give her the opportunity to minimize the damage that has already been done. I will give her a chance to return to being faithful to her husband. I'll give her the choice that I don't think she gave Michael. If she proves through her actions that this is not what she wants, then Michael will be notified. Karen was crushed into the corner, pressed against the small window, so I could look at Paul's photo again without risking the guy next to me seeing it. Paul looked so delicious. It wasn't that his privates were any bigger than Michael's. In fact, Michael's probably had more thickness, but the darkness was new. After all my years with Michael, that was what Michael had lost. It wasn't that he was out of shape, but Paul was 25 years younger, and it showed. Paul knew he was attractive. This was obvious from the confidence in his posture. It was nicely and provocatively, and I definitely felt provoked. I looked a little longer, giddy at the thought of what I would be doing with this private part in a few short hours later. Unfortunately, on the flight home, I would have to delete the image, but for now, I could enjoy it. And I really did enjoy it. Perhaps too much if the need to squeeze my legs together to relieve the throbbing pain at the top of my thighs was any indication. My eyes followed the line of his six-pack abs, and my fingers tingled with memories of the last time I was with him. As the plane leveled off, I stole a glance to the side, confirming that the guy in the next seat was already immersed in Dan Brown's latest bestseller. Okay, I wouldn't have to talk him out of talking. I stared at Paul's handsome manhood and abs for a moment longer, imprinting the image in my mind, and then turned off the phone smiling. I closed my eyes and let my mind wander back to my last date with Paul. We agreed to meet in Houston at a small B&B overlooking the harbor for our first night away. Houston was neutral territory where neither of us was likely to run into anyone we knew. I'd like to say we were romantic and went sightseeing and had lunch or dinner first before getting without clothes, but I'd be lying. Overwhelmed by passion, we never left the room after check-in. That was the difference. That's what made it so addictive with Paul. I loved Michael, and he loved me, but after so many years together, our love was not driven by passion. It was gentle and caring, every touch a declaration of love. With Paul, my animal instincts came alive. All I wanted was to rip his clothes off and let him inside me. There was no love, no tenderness, just two people using each other's bodies for intimate pleasure and release. If I had thought that the fact we had 2 nights together meant a slower pace or more affection, I would have been disappointed. Paul continued to have me as if he had a stick of dynamite strapped to his 5th place. My chest tingled, remembering how Paul greedily chewed and kissed it without loving caresses. This was not lovemaking, it was greedy hunger. It made me feel young, pretty, and desirable. Paul's resilience was something to admire. I scorned in place, remembering how I had clenched and throbbed as he made me experience pleasure after pleasure until I was a limp rag beneath him, begging for mercy. After some rest and a hot shower, we did it again. This time, I leaned over the cabinet, still wet from the shower. Needless to say, we needed another shower to clean up in preparation for another intimate session. In fact, that's all we did all weekend, have a night, wash, and eat. Thank goodness Michael was on a rare field trip to the Kimberly Fields and wasn't due home for another 5 days, giving me time to rest, heal, and get tight again. Michael was lovemaking. Paul was raw animal intimate. Michael left me feeling loved and valued. Paul left me feeling satiated and exhausted. I loved and wanted both. If it were for my current situation, I would have enjoyed a quiet chuckle at the expense of my fellow travelers. It has always been surprising that the moment the fasten seatbelt sign goes out, there is a massive rush of everyone into the aisle. A mad scramble to get their carry-on luggage out of the overhead compartments despite then having to wait a long time to actually get off the plane. Normally, I would wait until the plane was nearly empty before packing my things, but since my plan required me to keep Karen a relatively short distance ahead, I joined the rest of the economy class passengers in the aisle. By allowing the gentleman next to me and the passengers opposite to gather first, I managed to position myself 4 people behind Karen. She showed no signs of recognizing me earlier, but I didn't want to risk that it was an accidental mistake on her part. I maintained my distance as we crossed the air bridge into the terminal. As I suspected, she headed to baggage claim. Women like Karen always took luggage with them. The carousel was motionless. The cargo had not yet been unloaded. My target scanned all the faces in the room before turning her gaze to the exit. She tapped her foot impatiently and looked at her watch. As the first piece of luggage began to spin, her gaze moved between the carousel and the exit. When her face lit up like a Christmas tree, and she even took a step towards the doors as she raised her hand to wave, I turned to look in the same direction. I couldn't help but snort contemptuously. Like a cliché, her partner looked significantly younger than I knew Karen to be. I waited as he hurried towards her, hoping that their greeting would let me know whether this was their first meeting or one of many. My heart sank. I closed my eyes, letting the air escape. The lovers, now I knew that this was exactly what they were, showed no signs of embarrassment, awkwardness, or clumsiness. For a moment I doubted my plan. The woman was guilty as hell, but the thought of Michael, now in his 60s, having to deal with the betrayal of his second wife, his love and trust, kept me on the right path. Decision confirmed, I secretly photographed their passionate embrace. Sliding the phone back into my pocket, I walked towards the couple while she was still in his arms, their lips locked. I tapped her on the shoulder. I heard the wet slap of their lips parting and shuddered in disgust. Even after many years of Sue and the divorces I had seen among colleagues and friends due to a cheating spouse, I still could not understand how one partner could be so disloyal to another whom they had promised to love and cherish. To me, this was still the worst kind of betrayal one partner could commit against another. "Sorry," I began, almost smiling at my bold words. "Mrs. Davenport, you demonstrated on the plane that you don't remember me, but unfortunately for you, I remember you." Her spin to face me coincided with a sigh from her companion, Mrs. We both ignored him. "Who are you?" she demanded, examining my features. Then, as I watched, her eyes turned halfway towards her lover. Was it worry in her eyes that he had just found out something she wanted to hide? It was only a moment before her full attention returned to me. I could almost hear the gears of her brain turning, trying to remember me. I held back a smile when no light of recognition appeared in her gaze. Unfortunately for her, she was like many born into privilege and was oblivious to those she considered beneath her. "Who I am doesn't matter. What matters is who you are, or better yet, who you're married to." "Married, Karen?" her lover intervened. "You said you were divorced and have been for many years." "Paul, honey, please give me a minute. I can explain. I've been separated for a long time. My ex just doesn't want to admit we're over and is dragging out the divorce." I watched as he examined her face. His uncertainty was clear as day. I thought about confirming his doubts, but I wanted her choice to be sincere and not decided because her lover left her. Anything less wouldn't be fair to Michael. "Please give me a moment with, Dave." She paused, waiting for me to introduce myself. I simply raised an eyebrow and replied, "Tom." "Just give me a minute with, Tom to sort this out, and then we can enjoy our weekend as planned." She was convincing, I have to admit. If I had heard Michael talk about their upcoming trip to Perth to visit their son earlier this week, I might have believed her. Her lover nodded reluctantly. I felt his gaze on my back as Karen grabbed my forearm and pulled me away from his hearing. "Now, although this is none of your business, as I said, I am separated. I appreciate your concern for my soon-to-be ex-husband, but I really must insist that you leave me alone and don't interfere in what doesn't concern you." I was tempted to applaud her. She was such a good actress, but I kept my game plan in mind. She needed to make a choice freely and clearly, not under the pressure of a lack of options. "Wow, you're good," I said, smiling benevolently for her lover's benefit. "So, if you're so separated, who is Michael taking to Perth next week to visit Jared?" She gasped and looked at me more closely. I felt her irritation that she could not remember me. Regardless, she now knew that I knew Michael well enough to be aware of his plans. "I'll cut the conversation short, Karen. I'll give you a choice, one that you must carefully consider. Yes, a choice and a chance." "What are you even talking about?" She was impatient. Her behavior irritated me, and I again thought about giving her the opportunity to save her marriage by giving Michael a chance to avoid pain. I was offering his wife something I didn't think she deserved. I became more determined, thinking, I'm doing this for Michael, not her. "I'm talking about giving you a choice between Michael and your lover. I'm talking about giving you a chance to save your marriage and spare your husband enormous pain that we both know he doesn't deserve. He saved you and your children from poverty, and now how do you repay him?" She turned pale, and for the first time seemed unsure of herself. Then I realized that for the last 2 minutes, I had only seen a facade in front of me. Instead of being a confident woman in complete control of the situation, she was a frightened wife whose world was about to collapse. "Ah, not so separated, I see. What do you want?" "Nothing. I don't want anything from you. In fact, quite the opposite. I'm offering you something that, frankly, I don't think you deserve. But against my better judgment, I'm giving you a chance to avoid Michael finding out about your lover. I am giving you a chance to save your marriage." Her shoulders slumped slightly, but since she was standing sideways to her lover, I doubted he noticed. "What do I need to do?" she asked. "You don't have to do anything. Weren't you listening? I'm giving you a choice." She nodded and I smiled. "It's almost noon. I'm giving you until 3:30 p.m. Melbourne time to call me from code 03, confirming you're back in Melbourne, or I'll send Michael the email I've already prepared with these 3 attachments. I took my phone out of my pocket and quickly opened the folder containing the 3 photos I had taken of her. "Oh, God," she made a sound, closing her eyes. "Please, please don't do this. Michael will be broken." "You really need to learn to listen better, Karen," I said. "You have until 3:30 local time in Melbourne, so considering daylight saving time, you have just over 2.5 hours to return home." "But it's almost noon. That's not enough time." "Oh, it will be difficult, but there are several direct flights that will get you there in good time. Here's my business card. Call or email me on my mobile no later than 3:30, and the email with attachments will never leave my drafts folder. Well, unless I suspect you're exhibiting poor judgment as you've been doing lately. You call me at the appointed time, and from that moment you behave as a wife should behave towards Michael as her husband, and the letter and photographs will never see the light of day." She took my business card, reading my name and title, and I finally saw it dawn on her. She swallowed loudly, looking up at me with fear. I smiled and nodded, confirming her unspoken question. Yes, I was that Tom. As I watched, I saw the exact moment when she remembered the story her husband had told her. Okay, now she knew exactly how uncompromising I could be. At that moment, from the corner of my eye, I saw the driver holding a sign with my name. I turned a quarter to wave at him, and when I turned back, Karen was deep in thought next to the luggage carousel. Her lover was walking towards her again. Looking at my watch, I realized that I didn't have time to watch what would happen next. I was on the verge of making it to my first meeting on time. From that moment on, Karen's fate and the fate of my best professional friend were in her hands and in the hands of the gods. Karen, when Tom pushed me, I didn't even try to explain myself. All I could tell him was, I need to get back to Melbourne. Forget my number. My treatment of Paul showed me that there was not an iota of doubt left in my soul that I wanted to save my marriage. Current circumstances don't count. I love Michael. Tom was right. Michael didn't deserve what I did. Michael saved me years ago. He was a knight in shining armor for me and my children, and I repaid him by cheating. And all this because Paul reminded me of Jerome, my first husband. Jerome, who left me while I was still crazy in love with him. Jerome, who loved me on the morning of the day he left, never to appear again. I should have hated him for his betrayal. Instead, I always felt like I needed clarification, an explanation of why. Why when I did nothing but love and support him emotionally and financially? Why when I maintained my figure and was ready to satisfy him at his first call? I still don't understand what I did to make him leave. In some way, my affair with Paul was a way to get the closure that had been denied me for almost 30 years. The fact that he also made my 52-year-old self feel young when the impending birth of Jared's second child made me feel old was just a nice bonus. For the first time since meeting Paul, I felt ashamed of what I had done. Tom's words made me admit that all my excuses for cheating were empty. I looked at my watch. Time was passing too quickly. I scanned the entire length of the carousel. My luggage was nowhere in sight. I made a split-second decision. My new Victoria's Secret lingerie, screw the little black dress I bought especially for this weekend, my phone charger. I left my luggage and walked as quickly as possible in my ridiculously high heels to the check-in counters. I was born the daughter of a rich man, accustomed to privilege and being treated with respect. This served me well when a man in a three-piece suit rushed past me, waving his briefcase to take his place ahead of me in line. As I waited with barely contained impatience, my stomach knotted with delay. I allowed memories I would normally deny to fill my mind, vague, barely visible images of the mother I never really knew, who died when I was 4 years old. Would anything have been different if she had survived? Did she love my father? I found it hard to believe. With me, he was always strict and aloof, never affectionate. Later, when I was a teenager, I realized that he was also a racist and a snob, and these were his best qualities. Would he have been kinder, more supportive? Would I have rebelled the way I did? My father would hate a young, half-Aboriginal ex-convict, ironically hired with money he had given to a local charity as a tax dodge. His name was Jerome, and he cleaned our pool. I slept with Jerome, became pregnant by him, and to provoke my angry father, married him. My father's reaction was as cruel as it was predictable. As soon as I announced that abortion was not an option, he kicked me out, complete and final alienation. I was brought back into the present by the frown of the man in the three-piece suit. It only took me a moment to understand why he was making his irritation known. The couple currently being served were Asian and clearly had little English. The more I listened, the more my irritation grew. Why couldn't they afford to hire a second person to help at the counter? Brisbane is the state capital, damn it. My attention turned to the man in the three-piece suit. He turned his head this way and that, looking around at the other airline counters. It woke me up from my stupidity. Why was I waiting in the Qantas queue? Just because I flew into Brisbane on their flight didn't mean I had to fly back to Melbourne with them. The man took a step towards the Virgin Australia counter and decided for me. I took off my heels and, ignoring the surprised looks, ran to the Virgin counter, beating the man to the finish line. He was unhappy, but I didn't care. "I'd like a 12 o'clock flight to Melbourne, please." "Madam, I have a couple of seats left on this flight, but the gates will be closing soon. Do you have luggage to check in?" "There is nothing. I will need some form of identification." I gave her my driver's license and my credit card and quietly begged her to quickly enter my information into the computer. "I took the liberty of checking you in, Mrs. Davenport, but you will still have to run to catch your flight on time. Here's your boarding pass." My fingers closed around the ticket, and I ran towards the gate, holding my purse to my side with my elbow to keep it from dangling. I looked down to check the gate number, then scanned the signs overhead for the corresponding gate. I felt like I was in a movie, an innocent woman dodging and running away from the enemy. Only I wasn't innocent. All I could do was pray that my guilt would not be punished by fate. When I saw the line at security, I sighed. I made my decision and headed towards what seemed to be the fastest-moving line, and prayed it wouldn't be like the supermarket, where I never quite picked the fastest one. I threw my purse into the plastic tray. At least by taking off my shoes beforehand, which were covered in metal rivets and buckles and would probably set off metal detectors, I saved some time. After pushing the tray onto the conveyor belt, I headed towards the metal detector, only to hear the alarm go off. "Please remove your belt, madam," I sighed. So much for saving time by already taking off my shoes. Even as I was returning to the trays, I began to unbuckle my big fancy belt buckle. When I pulled it through the loops of my jeans, I threw it without ceremony in the tray. I went through the metal detector again and breathed a sigh of relief when the employee gave me the sign. I didn't even think about putting the belt back on. I just stuck it in my purse next to my heels. I ran again, blessing the time my personal trainer had me spend running on the treadmill. I literally slid the last 2 meters to the gate, out of breath as I handed my ticket to the employee. "You're just in time," the employee said with a smile, scanning my ticket before handing it back to me. "Please use the back stairs, as you are in seat 25B. I nodded, still out of breath. I took out my heels and roughly put them on my feet, clumsily adjusting the straps. One good thing about arriving so late for the flight was that most people were already in their seats, their carry-on luggage already stowed, making finding my own seat much quicker and easier. I sank into my seat, feeling a wave of relief wash over me. I did it. This flight will get me to Melbourne in 3 hours. I will have enough time to contact Tom and prevent my affair from being discovered. Relaxing, I turned my head to see who was sitting next to me. It was a young mother nursing a baby, a little girl with dark curls. Looking at those curls made me think of my daughter, Julia. She, too, had curls as a baby, silky black and combined with the creamy coffee complexion inherited from her father. She always looked Spanish. As I remembered Julia as a baby, I remembered other things, like the cleaning job I found a few weeks after I brought her home from the hospital. I looked at my hands. They showed no signs of hard work. Numerous manicures and jars of hand cream took care of that. It wasn't hard for me to do such menial work. Since my father had rejected Jerome, we had little choice. And although my modest earnings did not provide us with much comfort, I considered us lucky. I was definitely happy. Even going from a mansion to a tiny trailer didn't bother me. To me, that little trailer contained more love than my dad's entire huge house. So much love that I got pregnant again, and Jared joined our happy family a month early after a difficult pregnancy. Things became even more difficult than usual. In the last month or two of pregnancy, I was unable to work, and the unemployment benefits we received barely covered the rent. Despite the difficulties, I was still happy and made sure Jerome knew I had no regrets. I never complained, even when trying to cope with 2 children while working, but as it turned out, my happy family was just an illusion. Jerome, true to his Aboriginal heritage, felt uneasy being tied to one place. He talked longingly about the outback and told me stories about his grandfather's journeys. However, I never thought he would actually leave me, leave us. How wrong I was. One day I returned home from work after a long bus ride to discover that 5-year-old Julia was babysitting Jared. The car, Jerome, and all valuables, including my grandmother's brooch, were gone. I later learned that the meter contents of our bank account were also missing. Even worse, he left me in debt without paying the last month's rent for the trailer. The trailer park manager turned a deaf ear to my pleas. No amount of tears moved him. The kids and I went from having a happy, if modest home to being homeless. That's how Michael found us. The sound of a voice through the loudspeaker brought me back to the present. Instead of the expected seatbelt warnings, we were notified of an expected 30-minute delay due to the need to remove baggage from the hold for a passenger who did not show up for the flight. After hearing the reason for the delay, I couldn't control my poisonous thoughts. Damn the airline rule that says if a passenger falls asleep in the terminal and doesn't show up at the gate after check-in, everyone else is stuck waiting for their luggage to be removed from the plane. I was hoping the idiot would die in his sleep. Looking down, I saw that my knuckles were white. I was clutching my purse so tightly. Taking a few deep breaths, I made a conscious effort to loosen my grip. Relax, I told myself. What's the worst that can happen? You'll arrive at 3:45 instead of 3:15. You'll still have enough time to contact Tom and prevent disaster. To distract myself more than for any other reason, I let my thoughts wander to my meeting with Michael. What I remembered most from our first meeting was his kindness and caring. He looked at me with his soft gray eyes, and I immediately knew I could trust him. "Are you in some kind of trouble?" he asked me. Those 7 words were enough to open the floodgates and make me choke on my story. Of course, my sobbing had the same effect on Julia and Jared. Poor Michael, although it didn't bother him. Somehow he put us all at ease, reassured us, and instilled enough confidence in me that I didn't mind as he bustled us into his car. I didn't mind when he took us to the trailer park and helped me pack the remaining things that wouldn't fit in the only suitcase I had. Tears welled up in my eyes as I remembered how he sat down in front of Julia and Jared, offering them ice cream. Gently but firmly, he ordered them to sit under a large elm tree while he and I filled the trunk of his car with what little kitchen utensils and linens I had. And it didn't stop there. He took us to his house, which had a small 2-room guest apartment located in the back corner of the property. After he left us and insisted that we unpack and make ourselves at home, he went and did a shopping for the week. Not since I left my father's house had I seen a refrigerator and pantry so stocked. It was like Christmas. Much later, when I finally felt that the children and I would not be thrown out onto the streets, I dared to ask Michael what he was doing in the park that day. By that time, I had already worked as his housekeeper for several weeks and knew that he worked on the other side of the city, far from the park. He must have seen the look of panic on my face. I definitely remember the sensation squeezing my chest until I could barely breathe. "Don't worry, Karen," he said, patting my hand comfortingly. "The fact that you and the children live in an apartment turned out to be much better for me. Now I come home to a clean house, a home-cooked dinner, and to find my clothes cleaned and ironed," I added, so he knew how much I was doing. "Yes, and it's also..." A lump formed in my throat from the memories. Not once did he make me feel like a beggar whom he took under his wing. He never made it seem like charity. He was always nothing but generous and supportive. He entrusted me with the keys to his house, opened accounts for me to make purchases for both households, and even paid me a small salary. I could rob him, run away with his money, hell, I could sneak up on him in the middle of the night and stab him while he was sleeping. And I think, in a way, that's what I did. I hit him in the back, only I waited almost 30 years to do it. Coming to terms with the truth of what I had done was too much. My mind recoiled from this. I only met Paul 4 times. It wasn't love, it was a fleeting affair. This was the last gasp of youth. Michael doesn't know. And if God is merciful, he'll never find out. I will fix it. The simultaneous movement of the plane, along with the pilot's announcement, interrupted my thoughts. I checked my watch. Takeoff was 40 minutes late. I frowned and prayed that there would be no more delays. Once the plane leveled off, I took out my phone and checked the weather forecast for Melbourne. As a city, it had a reputation for experiencing all 4 seasons in one day, and the last thing I needed was an unexpected storm causing further flight delays. Relaxed, sunny, with possible rain, I noted and calmed. I returned to my thoughts. I'm sure Michael has no idea about my short-term affair. What he doesn't know can't hurt him. I just need to keep him in the dark. Really, what harm have I done? After almost 30 years, a small hobby in flirting that didn't threaten Michael or our marriage in any way. Not for a moment during my time with Paul did the thought of leaving Michael even arise. In fact, in some ways, Michael benefited from it. Being with Paul made me feel young and hot. Michael was the recipient of my renewed libido. What's the worst that could happen if Michael finds out? I'll have to throw myself at his feet and beg for forgiveness. He loves me. He won't want to lose me and the children. It may take time and be difficult, but he will forgive me. I've been thinking about this for a while. What if he doesn't forgive me? What if he kicks me out? We had a marriage contract. Cheating on either side meant leaving the marriage almost empty-handed. Even when I worried about the infidelity clause, I brushed it aside. The agreement was drafted and signed almost 30 years ago, and there have been several cases in the news recently of courts overturning prenuptial agreements. Besides, I simply could not imagine that Michael would want to see me without a livelihood after all he had saved me from such a fate once before. He was the type of human knight in light armor, not an avenger. And then there's Julia and Jared and their kids. If he leaves me because of one small offense, leaving me without a livelihood, the children will abandon him. It would be devastating for him to lose them. He won't risk it, no matter how upset he is with me. Once again, my thoughts wandered to the past. I closed my eyes and saw Julia and Jared's faces when we returned home with our groceries to find that Michael had set up a small play area for them, including a swing, a slide, and a climbing frame in the backyard. How many times have I looked out the window to see Michael pushing one of them on the swing? Too many to count. The same with the pool he built when they got a little older. How many times have I watched him play and splash with them? So many that one memory merged with another. He was a wonderful father, patient, but strict and always giving of his time. He never missed a football game, a school event, or a birthday. He loved my children, always loved and always will love. I was sure of that. And now we have grandchildren, and I know for sure that he loves being a grandfather as much as he loved being a father. He would be heartbroken if Julia and Jared cut him out of their lives and their children's lives, and that would probably happen if he divorced me, left me destitute. Blood, after all, is thicker than water. He won't risk it. The more I thought about it, the more confident I became. I may have to swallow my pride and appeal to Michael to win him back and his pride, but I won't lose him. What if, by some coincidence, I'm wrong? Well, then I'll fight Michael in court. I will live with Julia and her husband Jack, and I will plead my youth and the circumstances of a young single mother who had no choice but to sign a prenuptial agreement. I was a good and loving wife to him for almost 30 years. The courts will not allow him to put me on the street without a livelihood again. The pilot's thin voice through the loudspeaker brought me back to reality with his words. My chest felt empty, as if my heart had dropped into my stomach. More delays. A medical emergency flight bound for Melbourne means all other incoming flights have to maintain a holding pattern. Lord, how long will this take? Please, God, no more than 20 minutes. That would leave me 20 minutes to get off the plane and find a landline phone to call Tom. Every minute without an update was excruciating. Time seemed to pass too quickly. In my thoughts, I saw an hourglass where the sand rushed through a narrow funnel, forming an ever larger pyramid at the base. I checked my watch. 15 minutes had passed. I didn't know whether to cry or scream. Miss, when the hell is the pilot going to land this flying trough? I asked the young flight attendant, annoyed, grabbing her arm to make her stop. Sorry, she asked, smiling. I asked, where are we going to land? These delays are unbearable. What kind of airline do you have here? I have an important meeting, and if we don't land soon, I'll be late. Madam, this is an air doctor flight. We are awaiting clearance. This means a patient with a critical injury or illness, possibly a matter of life and death. I'm sorry, but aviation regulations dictate that this takes precedence over passenger meetings, business meetings, personal reasons, or any other journey-related matters. The pilot's hands are tied. We cannot land without permission from Melbourne Air Traffic Control. We appreciate your patience. I thought, forming what I hoped looked like a smile. The minutes seemed to fly by like rockets, each second packed with 1,000 thoughts and feelings, too much for such a short time. Hello, this is your captain, Tom Johnson. I have good news and bad news. The good news is that the air doctor flight has landed. The bad news is that since we refueled in Brisbane, we are asked to maintain our holding pattern until other fuel-starved flights land. We estimate the additional delay to be approximately 20 minutes. We thank you for your patience. Damn! The words escaped me uncontrollably, loud enough to attract the attention of surrounding passengers. The looks directed at me ranged from amused to outraged. Ashamed, I hung my head. Checking my watch, at best, the delay meant I would have only 15 minutes to get off the plane and find my phone. At worst, 5 minutes. It was too risky. I needed to contact Tom. I needed to inform him about the delays. Leaning over, I retrieved my purse from under the seat in front of me, fighting panic as I fumbled for my phone and had slid down under my wallet, belt, and notebook. The screen was black. Did I turn it off earlier? I didn't remember. I knew the battery was almost empty. I noticed it when I received text messages from Paul before takeoff, which now seemed like an eternity ago. Pressing the power button yielded nothing. No, it can't be dead, I muttered to myself, cursing my oversight of not charging it before leaving. Why did I pack my spare charger in my suitcase instead of my purse? Because you wanted to be able to tell Michael a half-truth that you forgot to charge it, I whispered. Pressing the power button again, I prayed for a miracle. Still, nothing happened. What should I do? Please let us land in time for me to reach a public telephone in the terminal, I silently pleaded, watching the seconds tick away on my watch. I searched the faces of the flight attendants for any signs of when we would land, silently begging the pilots to announce our turn to land. The weight of uncertainty was unbearable. My nerves were on edge. Another delay, and I feared they would snap. 2:05 p.m., 2:09 p.m. With every passing minute without news from the airline, it became harder to contain my panic. I don't want to lose my husband. I don't want to fight in court. I don't want to explain to my children. My thoughts drifted to my old life, where Michael looked at me with love and tenderness. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now beginning our landing approach. We thank you for your patience during these unexpected delays. I didn't hear the rest of the announcement. All that mattered was that we were finally landing. I slung my bag over my shoulder, fully intent on being the first off the plane, even if it meant pushing through other passengers. The pressure of the landing was more than welcome. The sound of the wheels touching the runway was music to my ears. The roar of the reverse thrust was a symphony. As soon as the fasten seatbelt sign turned off, I leaped up, heading for the back exit. They had better start disembarking from the rear of the plane. I felt waves of anxiety leaving me. Other passengers and even flight attendants avoided eye contact with me. They probably thought I was crazy, and they wouldn't be entirely wrong. Opening the rear doors felt like opening floodgates, and I rushed out like a torrent. Descending the stairs to the runway, I entered the terminal at full speed, scanning left and right for a public phone. I rushed forward, oblivious to the glances of other passengers. Finally, reaching the main terminal where all the shops and eateries were located, I saw it. Relief surged through me, giving me one last burst of speed. Barely stopping in front of the phone booth, I quickly glanced at the phone. It accepted both credit cards and coins. Thank goodness, because I wasn't sure how much change I had. I pulled my wallet out of my bag, cursing myself for not planning ahead, and held it in my hand. 329. I inserted my Visa, holding Tom's business card, and began dialing the number. Credit card payments are temporarily unavailable on this phone. Please use coins. The recorded message made me make a sound. Fiddling with my wallet, I found only 50 cents, a 20 and 10 cents. I prayed it would be enough to connect to Tom's cell phone. Between my ear and shoulder, holding Tom's business card in one hand and dialing the number with the other, the call went straight to voicemail. "Tom, I'm in Melbourne, where my time is up." "No, God, no." I looked at my watch. 3:32. My legs weakened, and I sank to the floor, still clutching the phone. My life, as I knew it, was over. Tom, at this very moment, contacts Michael, informing him of my betrayal. Possible words and phrases that could complete his letter flashed through my stunned mind, but my thoughts raced too fast to grasp any of them. I saw pictures of Tom and Paul again, me kissing Paul. Michael would be devastated, heartbroken, destroyed, and it's all my fault. I saw Michael's face as clearly as if he were standing in front of me, his broken expression filled with grief, tears flowing down his cheeks. The only other time I'd seen that look on his face was when we almost lost Julia to meningitis. At that moment, the full extent of how dear he was to me, how much I loved and needed him, dawned on me. The feeling of guilt made me swallow convulsively. I had wronged him in the worst possible way, and to add to my crimes, I had spent every minute since Tom confronted me rationalizing what I had done, minimizing my actions, justifying myself. What the hell was I telling myself? Why did I need closure for a relationship where my children and I were not only abandoned, but left destitute and in debt? Worse, am I so vain, so shallow, so pathetic that I need a man to make me feel attractive and desirable? It seems so. How could I even think about fighting Michael in court? How could I be so selfish? How could I become so self-centered? The idea of being on the opposite side of anything from Michael is simply wrong. Have I, despite myself, become my father? My stomach clenched with shame. Tom 4 o'clock showed in the bottom corner of my laptop screen. I sighed, not knowing if it was a blessing or a curse that my afternoon meeting ended early, leaving me time to think. Come on, Karen, call. Damn it, call. I reread my letter to Michael, tweaking it here and there, though I wished I had deleted it rather than edited it. 4:07. I checked the volume and charge of the phone. I knew they were fine, but I needed something to occupy my hands. I stared at the screen, willing it to light up with an incoming call. She should have landed by now, I thought. I'm not used to regrets, but I really kicked myself for being distracted and losing sight of her at the airport. Any sign that she had returned to her lover or had rushed to the front desk would have made my decision easier. I killed some time writing down every possible flight number she might have been on. Having done this, I crossed out all those that had already landed. The remaining list was very small. "Please," I silently begged her, "please don't make me be the one to destroy my friend and mentor. Please don't make me be the bearer of such devastating information. Please love him enough to want to protect him from such pain. Please want to save your marriage." 4:14. I growled in irritation. With deliberate movements, I brought the cup of coffee to my lips. I would rather throw it at the opposite wall, hence my overly controlled actions. "Call me, you selfish, arrogant 419. I rolled my neck back and forth, trying to relieve the tension. It didn't work. I got up and started pacing. It's not a cure, but it's better. 4:23. As I watched the status of the last non-landed flight from Brisbane to Melbourne change from delayed to landed, everyone else had already been on the ground for at least half an hour. Call, damn it, call. This man is the best thing that ever happened to you. Call. Walking was no longer helping. The temporary office they had given me in Brisbane was too small to accommodate my stress. Push-ups were what they were. 1. Should I do what I was going to do? 2. It's come to this. If she wants to save her marriage and prevent Michael from being destroyed, she would be in Melbourne right now. 3. If he calls now, I will remain silent and not devastate my friend. I will not bear, even if indirectly, responsibility for the destruction of his life. 4. If she doesn't call, it means she's staying in Brisbane. She is not interested in saving her marriage. She has already decided to leave Michael and may even have taken action to come out of the divorce in a better position. I got to 15 when a terrible thought occurred to me. Crap. Did I make a huge error in judgment? Could she have used the time since I left the airport to further her plans to destroy my friend? 16. If that's the case, what kind of friend am I by helping a good person get deceived again? I only did 20 push-ups. I swear that if Michael is deceived, I will help him in any way I can. Emotional support, financial support, hitman. 4:29. Damn you, heartless. I logged back into my laptop, which had gone into sleep mode. I was immediately redirected to my draft letter. My finger hovered over the send icon. I made a sound. I couldn't do it. I couldn't tell him such news in such an impersonal way. 4:30. Time had slowed down. I stared at this terrible instrument for what seemed like an eternity. 4:31. I reached for the phone. Michael's number was one of the last on my call list. Hi, Tom. How's Brisbane? Hearing Michael's voice almost made me lose my own. Michael, I have bad news. Information I really didn't want to know. Silence in response. Are you there? Yes, okay, go ahead. Did we lose the contract? I closed my eyes. Of course, he assumed it was about work. He trusted Karen. She and the children were everything to him. No, buddy, everything's fine from the work side. This concerns Karen. Karen? Yes, she was on the same flight as me this morning, sat ahead of me, actually. Then I told him everything, seeing the photo on her phone, watching her kiss her lover, assuming it wasn't the first time, confrontation, the choice I offered her, her obvious solution. All this time, Michael remained silent. At the end, I asked if he wanted copies of the photos and asked him to approve my actions. To the first question, he simply answered, "Yes, please," in a voice clearly trying to remain under control. The answer to the second was preceded by a few seconds of silence. "Thanks, buddy. You did the right thing. I need to go." The conversational tone informed me that he had hung up. My conscience soared before a fundamental sadness about my friend's fate brought me back to earth. Finally, I hit send on my email. I worried that I was 2 states away from him and couldn't offer comfort or at least reassure him that he wouldn't do something stupid. Then I scolded myself. Belinda, my soulmate since Sue left the picture, was sitting at home just 10 blocks from where my friend was suffering. I picked up the phone again and called her. Smiling, Belinda really was as smart as Sue thought. She listened to the story and was walking to her car when I finished. After asking for the address, she hung up. "Karen, are you okay?" The old woman's kind words brought me back to the present. Yes, thanks for your concern." I tried to get to my feet, doing my best to smile at the obviously reassuring old woman who was still looking at me with a worried look. I turned towards the central terminal, forcing my brain to think clearly and not slip back into panic. Telephone. I needed to find another phone, one that actually accepted credit cards, and called Michael. I hope my call reaches him before Tom's letter does. Confessing from me must be better than hearing it from someone else. It took me 2 tries to find a fully working public phone. If I wasn't so focused on reaching Michael, I would be outraged by the poor service from Telstra. First, I tried to call his cell phone, but it went to voicemail. I thought about leaving a message, but decided against it. I wanted to talk to him directly. I knew Michael would be home. He often worked from home on Fridays, so I called the landline. I held back my tears when it, too, went to voicemail. When, oh my God, will I be able to contact him? Desperately wanting him to hear it from me first, I decided to confess everything. The details could be discussed in person when we met face to face. Michael, it's me, Karen, honey. I did a terrible thing, and I'm so sorry about it. It's not because of you. It's not because of what you did or didn't do. Oh God, I'm all mixed up. It's so hard to tell you. I'm so embarrassed. Oh God, I had an affair. Just flirting, really. I was stupid and vain for letting things get out of hand with a young man. His name is Paul, and we only met 4 times. I swear it's true, darling. Please believe me when I say I love only you. I was a stupid, selfish cow. I know it, and I can't tell you how sorry I am. I was seeing him this weekend in Brisbane, but I ran into your colleague, Tom. I can't remember his last name, and he made me realize what a terrible and wrong thing I did, and I wish I could take it all back, go back in time and make a different choice. Please forgive me. Please don't go. I heard the squeak of shutdown. I'd run out of time. I felt in my purse for a handkerchief to wipe away the tears that my confession had caused. What's next, Karen? I quietly asked myself. Home, I answered. Take a taxi home and beg like never before. Decision made, I headed to one of the many exits from the terminal. As luck would have it, there was a line at the taxi stand. Of course there was. It was late Friday night and everyone wanted to get home. Finally, it was my turn. I looked at the driver and held back a groan. He was Sikh. Please let him speak clear English. I gave my Carlton address and received a nod in response. Friday afternoon traffic was terrible, and as usually happens when you're in a hurry, it seems like every traffic light turns red as we approach. Sometimes it seemed to me that I could walk faster than we were going. All the time I looked out the window, holding back tears, and prayed. I prayed like never before, going over everything in my head over and over again. Did the worst that could happen change after my confession and/or Tom's revelation? Better than anyone, I knew how deeply Michael was hurt by the betrayal of his first wife. After all our years together, will he give me another chance, or will I be thrown out on the street too? If it came to this, would he be generous in the settlement, or would he show no mercy? If I had to fight for my share of our assets, I no longer knew whether I would have the strength to do it or not. Finally, we stopped at the mailbox at my house. Michael's car was parked in the driveway. At least he was home. I walked along the path like a man condemned to the gallows, preparing myself for Michael's rage, for the venom that I was sure was in store for me. I deserved every angry word, every insult. All I could do was hope that by releasing the poison that my actions had injected into his heart, he would allow me to make amends for what I had done. Should I ring the doorbell or just walk in? With a deep sigh, I decided to use my key, allowing myself entry until Michael said otherwise. This was still my home. There was silence in the house. When I called, no one answered. Is he ignoring me? Confused, I checked the kitchen, then the master bedroom and the bathroom. No sign of Michael. My heart began to beat wildly. Where is he? His car is here. Could one of our friends have come to pick him up? I walked into the formal dining room and checked out the backyard from the windows. No sign. There was only one room left where he could be his office. I frowned as I stood in the doorway. He had definitely been in this room recently, but it was in disarray, which was not his style. Michael was usually a tidy person. His chair was pushed to the side, and the small coffee table was askew. There were papers scattered in what Michael always called organized chaos on his desk, but also underneath it, which was unusual. Following the trail of documents, I noticed that the phone had been taken off the hook. I frowned. It was strange. Then I noticed that the answering machine was open without the usual cassette. Panic gripped my heart. I had a bad feeling. I lowered my head to my chest, trying to regulate my breathing, which had become low and shallow. From the corner of my eye, I noticed something sticking out from under the wheel of Michael's office chair. I bent down and struggled to pull it out. It was sticking to the carpet. Sticker. Why did Michael need the sticker? Laerdal HS1. What the hell is Laerdal HS1? I sank into Michael's chair and wheeled myself into a comfortable position in front of the PC. One press of the keyboard showed that Michael was not logged out. I went to Google and typed in the name from the label. Oh my God, heart start 1 defibrillator. I swallowed my panic again and again, afraid to let my mind go where it wanted to. I leaned forward, accidentally hitting the mouse and opening Outlook. He sent letters to the children. Children? I scanned a few lines, but the only word I caught was prenuptial agreement. I shook my head, worrying later that the kids would find out what a fool I had been. Now I needed to get to Michael. I needed to know how terribly he regrets it, how much I love him, and how much he needs to fight for his life. I opened a new Google page and searched for the nearest hospital. With shaking hands, I called and asked if Michael had been admitted. My worst fears were confirmed. Michael was in the emergency room. He had suffered a heart attack. I rushed to the kitchen and grabbed the car keys off the hook before rushing into the garage. Waiting for the garage door to lift enough for me to pull out was excruciating. I entered the hospital's address into my car's navigation as I drove, praying for Michael's survival the entire time. Please do not die. Please don't let him die. What the hell happened? Michael was strong as an ox. He always underwent semi-annual medical examinations at his company, with results of a person 15 years younger than his chronological age. I didn't know who I was praying to God, Michael. All I knew was that if I prayed and begged hard enough, Michael would be spared. Hell, it might even turn out to be a good thing. I could be his nurse. He won't be able to take care of himself, and I'll have, 1, maybe 2 weeks when he will need me? If I can't convince him to forgive me during this time, then things are irreparable. The journey seemed very long. How I got there safe and sound with tears blinding me, I will never know. As usual, parking anywhere near the hospital was a nightmare. Luckily, the emergency room was well indicated. A bored receptionist was taking her time getting data from a mother and her baby. For what? The snotty child only had a scratch on his knee. This was obvious from the way he was digging with his foot at the leg of the chair he was sitting on. When it was finally my turn, the nurse took my information, made a short call, then told me to wait with the others. I must have sat there for almost an hour, guessing they were busy admitting Michael once he was stabilized. Luckily, I had grabbed a spare phone charger on the way out of the house, and the reception area had a convenient wall outlet. I was distracted by Googling heart attack care and a few other things that I'm not particularly proud of at the time, but I'm a firm believer in considering all options. I read about stent and bypass surgery. Everyone seemed to require a minimum of 2 weeks of bed rest. The reception nurse herself came and woke me up. I was ushered through the doors between the waiting room and the reception area itself. She didn't say much as I was led into a small office just outside the doors. A tired man in a white robe sat there. He must be the doctor. He stood up when I came in. So he's an old-fashioned guy. The middle-aged woman remained sitting with him. As soon as I sat down, I prepared to hear the diagnosis, armed with all my new knowledge. Memories of the following events are hazy at best. Somewhere in the first sentence, there was the phrase, "dead on arrival." I have no idea if I actually fell to the floor. Strange. It seemed like I was falling for an unreasonably long time. All I completely insufficient. What's the worst from earlier? That Dave burst into my brain with a huge noise. Dave! I was completely exhausted when the call woke me up from my nap. It was after 9 a.m. AEDT, and it was Julia, Michael's daughter, confirming that I had heard the news and asking me to come to their father's house. Oh yes, I heard the news. Of course, that's why I hardly slept a minute. Yet, as the first rays of dawn painted the world pink, I knew that I was not responsible for my friend's death. How? Michael told me. Unable to sleep, I got up quietly so as not to wake Belinda. As usual, I checked my emails and messages on my phone. I was too busy the previous night to watch. There was a voicemail that turned out to be from Michael. The departure time was 4:55 the previous day. Feeling as if I was communicating with the dead, I pressed the button to listen to what he left behind. The message was short, simple, and it was obvious that it was left by someone in pain. Thanks for being a true friend, buddy. Bye. I went back to bed and crawled into Belinda's arms, and she held me as I mourned the great man. Belinda accompanied me to Michael's house, and we were almost right in our guesses about what they wanted. I said they. Yes. Jared took the night terror from her and joined Julia at their old family home. They wanted to know what killed their father, and, like many of the recent mourners, to know who to blame. After establishing that Michael had sent them a letter before the hospital contacted them to tell them that their father had died, and that their mother was still there, sedated, Belinda and I created a timeline for them. Belinda managed to quickly get to Michael's house, noticed his car, but no one answered the doorbell. She allowed herself to walk around the house looking in the windows, so she saw him lying on the floor. Luckily, the back door was open, so she ran inside. Michael was lying on the floor, clutching his home phone in one hand and, oddly enough, his answering machine in the other. She couldn't find Michael's pulse. She rolled him onto his back with one hand while she called 911 with the other. Under the direction of the emergency operator, she began CPR. She had been performing it for what she guessed was about 10 minutes when the ambulance arrived. They moved all the furniture to the walls and connected the AED. At that moment, Belinda left the room to call me. By the time we calmed each other down, the paramedics had taken Michael away on a stretcher and headed to the ambulance. I asked Belinda to return to Michael's office and describe the scene. As a result of this description, she followed the ambulance to the hospital, and the back seat of her car was covered with Michael's cell phone, the answering machine tape, the envelope with the legal document, my email to Michael with attachments, and a signed email she found right next to the keyboard on the table. I was on my way back to Brisbane Airport and on the next flight home. Belinda met me at the airport with news that wasn't much of a surprise. While sitting in the waiting room, a woman she recognized as Karen came in and sat down, playing with her phone. Almost an hour later, Karen was taken away and did not appear again. Belinda pressed the emergency room nurse for news. It was only after she said that she had performed CPR and called an ambulance that she was told anything. Even then, it was limited to the phrase, "The lady was received and reassured after receiving devastating news." The timeline we constructed showed that Michael was busy in the last half hour of his life. Some details were necessarily speculation. I called him at 4:31. Then he must have read the letter. There on the table were printed photographs. After that, he probably looked in the file cabinet for his prenuptial agreement with Karen. It was a legal document in an envelope. We read it together, and it said, among other things, that the party who commits infidelity in a marriage walks away with nothing but personal belongings, not surprising considering how his first marriage imploded. From there, he wrote a one-page letter to his children, expressing his love for them and his grandchildren, born and unborn. Then he described my call and letter. That's how they found out my name. He apologized for the impending divorce and how ruthlessly he was going to treat their mother. Their mother, he told them, knew his views on adultery, so she should not have been surprised that he intended to strictly adhere to the marriage contract. In contrast, he was going to take care of them and leave all his worldly possessions to them, not to her. His love for them shone through the text, but his bitterness towards their mother grew. The evidence of hatred shocked his children. They understood much better after I shared the unknown story of their first mother and my own experience of love turning to hate terrible self. Knowledge when a person realizes that everything they considered true for years was a lie, that their memories were desecrated, their dreams shattered. The weird lesson after my lawyer, who answered the phone on Saturday, answered some questions for me. The only time stamp we could use to estimate the timeline was the message Michael left on my voicemail. We appreciated that his heart stopped during or shortly after Karen's confession, which we all listened to. We might have missed this piece of evidence if his compression of the recording device had not alerted Belinda to its existence. Once we had worked out the rough sequence of events, I felt it was time for Belinda and me to leave. Chances are the siblings had things they wanted to discuss in private. Just as I turned the signal to Belinda, we all heard a car pull up. We simultaneously turned our heads to the window. Though Karen was getting out of her BMW, Karen! Like in the hospital, I was slow to open my eyes. When will this nightmare end? The sound of the front door opening and closing made me cringe, and I closed my eyes even tighter. I have never felt so alone and isolated. The nightmare began when I woke up to the noise of the cleaning lady in my room making noise and noise. I flinched from the sharp noise. I carefully opened my eyes, blinking in an attempt to quickly get used to the light. I make a sound. My head hurt. It seemed blurry, as if I was trying to think through a ball of cotton wool. Why am I in the hospital? And then everything came back. Michael left, died. I will never feel his arms around me again. I will never see his smile or hear his laugh again. The love of my life is gone. I couldn't stand it. Hot tears filled me. I felt panic begin in my lower back, gaining momentum as it moved up my spine. The sound of an animal in pain pierced my brain. It took a moment for me to realize that it was me. I was that animal, screaming in agony. I struggled, fighting with the bedding. Hands held me back. "Here, take this, Mrs. Davenport." I turned my head back and forth, avoiding the edge of the plastic cup while simultaneously pushing away the submitted hand. It was necessary to escape. I needed to escape my new reality. Shh, calm down, accept it, and you'll feel better. Like a puppet whose strings have been cut, I go limp, unable to support my own weight. The nurse handed me the glass and pills again, and I obediently sipped and swallowed. Within a few minutes there was calm. Seeing that I was no longer a threat to myself or anyone else, the nurse patted my arm, encouraging me to lean back against the many pillows she was stacking behind me. "Someone will come by soon to make sure you're okay. Just rest until then." I followed the instructions, remaining calm but exhausted. Michael left forever. My mind was evading the reason. I didn't know how long I waited for discharge. Time had lost its meaning. Everything I did was an autopilot. My only goal was to get home to a familiar place where I could cry. I knew I needed to run out of tears before I tried calling Julia and Jared again. Perhaps it was for the best that they didn't answer their phones when I tried earlier. When I saw Julia's car in the driveway, I stopped. I realized that the hospital should have called her. My emotions were mixed relief that I didn't have to break the devastating news and fear of meeting her, knowing that she knew something about my affair. For the second time in 24 hours, I walked to my front door like a convict. I walked into the house and did a double take. Not only was Julia sitting in the living room, but so was Jared. The big surprise, however, was the presence of Tom and a blonde woman whom I didn't recognize and could only assume was his wife. I waited for my children to come and hug me, and was puzzled when they remained seated. They both just looked at me disapprovingly. I was speechless, pinned to the spot. Without even looking at me, Tom and his wife stood up and said goodbye, his wife hugging both of my children. Tom hugged Julia but shook Jared's hand. Julia even thanked Tom for what he did for her father. What? Thank him for what? For killing him? After they closed the front door behind them, Jared walked back into the living room and sat down where he had been sitting before. Julia avoided my gaze the entire time he was out of the room. I was simply stunned. Jared exchanged glances with Julia. She nodded, indicating that her younger brother would speak for both of them. "Mother, as you know, I am the executor of my father's will, and I must tell you that after discussions with my sister and others, I intend to act in accordance with my father's last wishes and ensure that the terms of the prenuptial agreement that you both signed many years ago are carried out, especially the part that says you are left with nothing." Jared brandished the prenuptial agreement. His speech was mostly emotionless, and he only looked at me when he pronounced the word "you" with emphasis. His eyes were burning. I was puzzled. Yes, I cheated on their father. It happens to the best of us. Why such hatred? What did they know? It couldn't be much. I went to Brisbane and they had pictures of me kissing another man. I answered automatically. I haven't been inactive for the last half day. Forget about the prenuptial agreement. It only applies if I committed adultery. So I went to Brisbane and got caught kissing another man. What does that prove? Julia leaned over the coffee table, picked up something and waved it in front of me. Damn it! It was an answering machine tape, the one where almost certainly there was my confession. The situation was getting out of control. I needed to get her back under control. Listen, children, this is none of your business at all, but you should know I've done my research. Even if I can't challenge this ancient prenuptial agreement, the law is clear. Unless otherwise stated, everything that belongs to your father goes to me in accordance with the terms of his last will and testament. Julia stood up, her eyes swollen with anger. This has nothing to do with us. This has nothing to do with us, you evil. Jared interrupted his sister by simply standing up and hugging her. I envied her for this human contact. He made shushing noises until her sobs subsided, then turned his attention back to me. Perhaps you mean the will we found in the file cabinet, updated about 5 years ago. The same one. Let me read you something. He picked up the email Michael had sent to the kids the previous day. I stood there with my head down as he laid out what Michael knew and how he knew it. I cringed as it turned into a tirade of hatred, all directed at me. My mind flashed back to the pain Michael felt when I first met him, how cautious and reluctant he was to trust. How the hell could I forget about this? My mind tried to make the connection, but my self-defense mechanisms kept stopping it. I forced myself to listen to Jared. He put the terrible letter down. This letter outlines Father's last wishes. As you can see, he went to the trouble of printing it out and signing it. I was confused. He turned it into a new last statement of will. Yes, Mother, you could try to fight it and the prenuptial agreement in court, but I'm warning you, Julia and I will fight you every step of the way. In disbelief, I looked at Julia. She nodded in agreement. This couldn't be true. This couldn't be happening. Why? Julia broke away from her brother's embrace and stood in front of me. Mom, we grew up hearing the story of how you met Dad, how he took us in when we were on the streets. In some ways, it made us love him even more than if he were our real father. He chose to do all these things with us and for us rather than consider raising us a responsibility. I have more childhood memories of Dad playing with me, helping me with homework, teaching me to ride a bike, swim and drive a car than I do of you. I am who I am today, and I think Jared would agree with me because of him, not you. You were always too busy with your friends. You never wanted to get your clothes dirty or your hair tangled. We owe everything to him. He loved us all with everything he had. Don't even deny it. Tom told us about Dad's first marriage and how he almost ruined it. You were there. You knew exactly what cheating would do to him, but you still did it. But I didn't think. I never imagined. It just happened. You talk like him some evil witch who deliberately destroyed your father, and you talk to that creep Tom like he's your new best friend. He killed your father. Jared stood next to his sister and glared at me with an anger that felt like a physical shove. No, Mom, Tom didn't kill Dad. You did. You stuck the knife in his gut and twisted it. That's what killed him. The truth of this resonated in my soul, but before full acceptance of its truth took over my being, my automatic defense mechanisms intervened, just like the body will twitch for many seconds after life has left it. You can't pay attention to what he wrote in that damn letter? He was just wounded. He spoke in anger. Your father loved me, I protested weakly. Jared stepped even closer. Yes, he loved, and yes, he spoke in anger. Imagine sitting there knowing you were having a heart attack. How much hate and passion does it take to write a letter, print it, and even sign it when you could be calling an ambulance for yourself? That's how important his last words were for him. He risked his life for them. That's what I don't understand. How could he die of a heart attack? He was as strong as an ox. God, he had a physical 4 months ago, and the doctor told him he was as healthy as a 40-year-old man. Funny you should mention that, Mom. We asked the hospital the same question. Do you know what they told us? The sarcasm in Julia's voice made me wince as I showed my head. Shock, Mom. Shock. Your betrayal shook him to his very core, and his poor broken heart shattered. Your selfishness, your vanity, your damn stupidity, and you so elegantly put it in your confession, destroyed him completely. My children and Jared's children will never know their grandfather because of you, and I will never be able to forgive you for that. I stepped back as if I had been pushed away. Jared walked forward, seemingly attached to me. I will believe until the end of my days that his father's last words were more important to him than his survival. I must believe this because the alternative is too terrible." Julia looked at him with confusion. Yes, the alternative is that he knew the pain of betrayal he was about to experience from the one our faithful mother was supposed to protect. He knew the level of agony that was coming and deliberately decided not to call an ambulance for himself. If I believed it for at least half a second, I might never be able to sleep again that he would choose to never know his grandchildren or not let them know him. It's just too terrible to think about. Julia sobbed as she sank back into her chair, her face pale. Jared walked over to her and placed his hand on her shoulder, squeezing it tightly before turning to me again. "So, Mom, it is with our Father's passion that we will fulfill his last wishes." And that's all I remember for a very, very long time. Karen, sitting on the couch, surrounded by packing boxes. My eyes fell on the small plastic container that held a small portion of Michael's ashes. I couldn't look at him for long. It was too painful and surreal. How could it be that something so small, so insignificant, contained the remains of such a great man as Michael? I needed movement. I stood up and stretched my legs, then walked aimlessly from one packed box to another, running my fingertips along their edges. So little, in fact, from such a long, rich, and full life together. I guess I should consider myself lucky that the kids let me take as much as they did. They could only force me to leave with clothes and toiletries. Taking a circle around the room, I stopped in front of the wall where a beautiful antique sideboard once stood and looked at the ghostly outline where we hung a reproduction of our wedding. It showed Julia nestled in the crook of Michael's arm, his other arm wrapped around my waist, and Jared standing proudly in front of us. We were all smiling, beaming with happiness. Now the empty wall with its ghostly empty frame spoke to me more eloquently about the emptiness of my future than words. I sighed, tired and sad. I was between a rock and a hard place with an impossible solution. I could agree to Michael's last wishes and leave without a fight, thus keeping alive the glimmer of hope that one day my children would forgive me and allow me to be a part of their lives. This option meant my working skills, other than home economics, were non-existent. I was too young to receive a superannuation, but too old to be truly competitive in the job market when I had no qualifications. My other choice is to sue my own children in open court, knowing that by doing so I would lose Julia and Jared and their families forever. And of course I would refuse Michael's last wish. Both options were disgusting. I could blame Tom for what he said to Michael. I could blame Jerome, my first husband, for leaving me without explanation. I could blame hormones or aging or Paul for taking advantage of a vulnerable older woman. Hell, many psychologists would tell me that I could blame my mother for dying when I was so young, or my father for being distant and uncaring. But the truth is, yes, I could finally admit that I only have myself to blame. No one forced me to respond to Paul's flattery. Nobody forced me to sleep with him. No one forced me to lie and cheat on the person I vowed to love exclusively for the rest of my life. I made these choices, and now I had to live with the consequences. Thanks for watching. What did you think of Karen's shocking betrayal and the tragic consequences that followed? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more unbelievable stories.